Decades of whispers, backstage secrets, and unanswered questions. Bruno Mars, the man behind the glittering smile, has finally spoken. But what took so long, and why did the world wait decades for the truth? Beneath the fame, the chart-topping hits, and the sold-out arenas, a mystery has lingered, one that only now begins to unravel. Peter Jean Hernandez, known to the world as Bruno Mars, entered the world on October 8, 1985, in the heart of Honolulu, Hawaii. Born into a family steeped in music and performance, his childhood was far from ordinary. His father, Peter Hernandez Sr., was a percussionist, while his mother, Bernadette San Pedro Bayo, was a singer and dancer. From the age of 4, Bruno was thrust into the spotlight, performing in family shows at local bars, often donning sequined costumes that shimmered under harsh stage lights. To outsiders, this might have seemed like a childhood full of joy and laughter, but the reality was more nuanced. Behind the curtain, the young Peter was negotiating the fragile line between being a child and a performer, learning that applause came with unspoken expectations. Even in these early years, whispers of pressure and scrutiny followed him. Family tensions, financial strains, and the relentless demand to entertain created an environment where performance became survival. Friends and early collaborators described a boy who could charm any audience yet carried a weight that belied his age. At school, he was known for his charisma, but he was also quietly absorbing lessons about identity, fame, and the power of perception. By adolescence, he had begun experimenting with songwriting, drawing inspiration from funk, R&B, and pop icons, yet many of these efforts went unnoticed. Before he became the chart-topping sensation the world knows, Bruno's path was marked by near misses and quiet frustrations. He moved to Los Angeles in pursuit of a recording career, a city where dreams were often swallowed by industry indifference. He penned songs for other artists, including notable credits that hinted at his genius but left him largely in the shadows. Industry insiders recall a young performer who was constantly balancing authenticity with commercial viability, crafting a persona that would appeal to record labels while keeping his creative voice intact. Every choice carried a subtle tension: reveal too much of himself, and risk rejection; reveal too little, and remain invisible. Even as his early successes began to mount, rumors about his personal life began circulating, questions about relationships, identity, and private struggles. Media speculation was persistent but mostly ignored, leaving Bruno to navigate a delicate psychological landscape. How did he manage the duality of public adoration and private pressure? How did a boy raised on music, but haunted by industry uncertainty, evolve into the polished entertainer the world would later know? These formative years shaped more than a performer, they shaped a survivor. But what hidden sacrifices, personal compromises, and unseen struggles were woven into the foundation of the global superstar Bruno Mars would become? By the time Bruno Mars entered his late 20s, the world knew his name, his voice, and his signature moves. From the infectious grooves of "Just the Way You Are" to the retro-funk flair of "Uptown Funk," he had not only conquered the charts but had become a symbol of pop music's enduring charm. Awards piled up, record-breaking albums solidified his status, and arenas across the globe reverberated with chants of his name. To the casual observer, it appeared as though success had come effortlessly, as though the man behind the glittering smile was untouchable. Yet behind this polished exterior, whispers circulated, soft, persistent, and insistent. The media speculated on relationships that were never confirmed, questioned aspects of his personal identity, and hinted at struggles that were never publicly acknowledged. Tabloids thrived on ambiguity, painting shadows where clarity did not exist, and social media amplified every insinuation. Fans debated, often constructing narratives from fragments of interviews, blurry photographs, and fleeting public appearances. Throughout it all, Bruno remained a study in restraint. Publicly, he allowed his persona, the confident, playful entertainer, to take center stage. Rarely did he address the rumors directly, preferring silence to confrontation. Yet this silence was not absence, it was strategy, but also survival. Privately, the pressure of constant scrutiny created a psychological tension that few could understand. Every smile at an award show, every perfectly timed performance, masked a silent struggle, a delicate balancing act between the man he was, the image the world consumed, and the truths he kept locked away. Colleagues and insiders described him as both resilient and intensely private, someone who measured every disclosure, understanding the stakes of transparency in an industry that thrived on gossip. The rumors, though unconfirmed in many cases, weighed heavily, shaping decisions and fueling a quiet vigilance. Psychologically, he navigated a persistent cognitive dissonance, the adoration of millions versus the isolation of hiding personal truths. But what exactly were these rumors, and why did Bruno choose decades of silence over revelation? Were they mere distractions, or did they strike at the core of the man who had captivated the world with his music? The answers, as he would later reveal, were far more complex than anyone imagined. Behind the flashing cameras, sold-out arenas, and glittering awards, Bruno Mars' life was a study in contrasts. To fans, he was the effortless performer, the embodiment of joy and charisma on stage. But backstage, away from public scrutiny, the reality was far more complicated. Those who worked closely with him, tour managers, producers, and longtime collaborators, describe a man who was intensely private, calculating, and acutely aware of the stakes of exposure. Every smile, every casual remark was measured, a part of a carefully curated persona designed to protect both his artistry and his personal life. Friendships were a delicate balancing act. People came into his circle seeking access, and few earned lasting trust. Those who did were aware of the unspoken rule: nothing was to leave the room unguarded. One insider described Bruno as a man who lets people in just enough to keep them close, but never enough to truly know him. In an industry that rewards spectacle, vulnerability often becomes a liability. His talent opened doors, but it also created opportunities for exploitation, misinterpretation, and manipulation. Producers, label executives, and even peers occasionally pressed for personal details, while tabloids and gossip columns awaited any slip that could become a story. This constant negotiation between authenticity and survival defined much of his professional life. Every public appearance was a performance layered with strategy: where to reveal, how much to share, and when to retreat. Personal decisions, from relationships to creative choices, were scrutinized and often distorted. Misunderstandings built upon each other, creating a narrative that sometimes diverged sharply from reality. Even close friends admit that reconciling the public Bruno with the private Bruno was a near impossible task. Psychologically, this environment fostered both resilience and wariness. Bruno developed a heightened awareness of human motives, learning to discern intentions quickly and to protect the parts of himself that mattered most. The cost of this guarded existence was isolation, a sense of walking a tightrope between the world's expectations and his own truth. The walls he built were not just for privacy, they were shields against an industry that could, in an instant, commodify his personal life. But could someone so vigilant, so meticulously guarded, ever step out from behind the curtain and reveal the truths he had kept hidden for so long, without risking everything he had painstakingly built? The answer would not come until much later, and when it did, the revelation would ripple far beyond the stage. At 39, Bruno Mars stood at a crossroads few in the entertainment world fully understand. Decades of whispers, speculation, and carefully guarded secrets had followed him from the stages of Honolulu to arenas around the globe. By now, the pressure to maintain a flawless public image had become more than routine, it had become a psychological weight, pressing against the boundaries of his private life. Something shifted that year, a convergence of personal reflection, industry scrutiny, and the subtle passage of time that made silence no longer tenable. The decision to finally confirm the long-standing rumors was not spontaneous. Sources close to Bruno describe it as a calculated act of control, a deliberate step to reclaim his narrative from tabloids, gossip, and the constant speculation that had shadowed him for decades. In interviews and carefully crafted statements, he revealed layers of himself the public had never seen. For the first time, fans glimpsed the man behind the sequins and choreography, a person negotiating identity, privacy, and the extraordinary pressures of fame. Psychologically, the moment represented liberation as much as confrontation. Years of measured restraint had allowed Bruno to survive, to navigate an industry built on rumor and spectacle. But the cost had been internal: anxiety, hyper-awareness, and a persistent dissonance between perception and reality. Speaking openly was both a release and a risk, a willingness to expose vulnerabilities long hidden beneath performance, charisma, and perfection. Those closest to him recall a sense of relief, a quiet tension easing as if decades of silence were finally lifted. Yet, the revelation did not provide closure for everyone. Public reaction was immediate and intense. Fans debated, media dissected every word, and gossip columns scrambled to reconcile the confirmation with years of speculation. For Bruno, the choice was simple yet profound: control the story or allow it to continue to control him. In asserting his truth, he reclaimed agency over a life and career often shaped by external pressures. But what exactly did Bruno reveal, and how did it align, or clash, with the rumors that had long haunted him? The answer would redefine both the public's understanding of the superstar and the man who had lived in shadows for far too long. When Bruno Mars finally broke his silence at 39, the world reacted immediately, and with intensity. Fans, media, and industry insiders alike felt the tremors of a revelation that had been decades in the making. Social media erupted with threads of speculation, praise, and skepticism. Some hailed him for his courage, celebrating the honesty behind the music and the man behind the persona. Others reacted with disbelief, unable to reconcile the polished entertainer they knew with the truths he revealed. Across forums, talk shows, and headlines, every word he spoke was analyzed, dissected, and interpreted, often missing the nuance that had guided his decision to speak at all. Media outlets approached the story with both curiosity and sensationalism, framing narratives that sometimes distorted the complexity of his announcement. Headlines often emphasized shock value rather than the subtle personal journey that had led to the moment of disclosure. Analysts and cultural commentators debated the implications, wondering if this public confirmation would redefine celebrity transparency, or simply feed society's relentless hunger for intimate details of private lives. Psychologically, the exposure was a test of resilience. Bruno had spent years navigating the delicate dance between public persona and private reality, mastering control over what was visible while guarding what mattered most. The revelation forced him to confront the harsh reality of fame, a spotlight that magnifies not only achievements but also vulnerabilities. Friends and collaborators noted a mix of relief and tension in his demeanor. Relief for reclaiming agency over his own story, but tension from knowing that the world would never forget this moment, that scrutiny had only intensified. The backlash, while intense, also revealed something deeper about society itself: a fascination with celebrity secrets, a desire to witness the unmasking of figures long idealized and mythologized. Bruno's honesty was both courageous and dangerous. It exposed him to criticism while offering a glimpse of authenticity rarely seen in pop culture. The delicate balance between agency and vulnerability became a psychological tightrope, one that he had to navigate with care. Could Bruno maintain control over his narrative in the face of overwhelming public attention, or would the very rumors he chose to clarify threaten to define him once again? The answer would hinge on his next moves, and on his ability to survive the scrutiny he had so long avoided. Success, for Bruno Mars, was never without a price. Each award, each chart-topping single, each sold-out arena carried a hidden weight, an expectation not only to entertain but to remain flawless, consistent, and unassailable in the public eye. The persona that millions adored was carefully constructed, a mask designed to protect the private individual beneath. Yet, beneath the sequins and choreography, the pressure to maintain perfection was relentless. Every smile, every performance, every public appearance demanded both precision and energy, leaving little room for vulnerability. For decades, Bruno had suppressed parts of himself, keeping intimate truths locked away, hidden even from those closest to him. The decision to finally confirm the rumors was more than a public revelation, it was an emotional reckoning, a confrontation with the consequences of fame that he had long evaded. Close allies observed a complex mixture of emotions: relief at shedding years of secrecy, anxiety at exposing himself to judgment, and a quiet liberation from the weight of speculation. It was a rare glimpse into a side of Bruno the world had rarely seen, a man balancing the exhilaration of achievement with the psychological toll of constant scrutiny. Fame, as Bruno's journey reveals, magnifies secrecy rather than forgiving it. Every hidden fear, every unspoken doubt, every carefully guarded decision becomes magnified under the relentless gaze of the public. Insiders note that even his creative process was affected. Songs, lyrics, and performances were often shaped not only by artistic vision but by a psychological awareness of perception and expectation. This hyper-awareness, while a tool for career survival, also fostered isolation, a sense that true self-expression came with enormous risk. The emotional cost was compounded by the constant negotiation between public demand and private truth. The very act of confirming long-held rumors did not end the scrutiny, it intensified it, transforming speculation into confirmed reality. Bruno's struggle reflects a paradox of celebrity. The freedom to express truth is often inseparable from the exposure it brings, and the courage to reveal oneself carries the risk of reinterpretation, misunderstanding, and relentless observation. How does one reconcile decades of hidden truth with the unyielding glare of global attention? For Bruno Mars, the journey was only beginning, a delicate navigation of identity, artistry, and humanity under a spotlight that never dims. With the long-standing rumors confirmed, Bruno Mars entered a new phase of his life and career, one defined not by secrecy, but by intentional control over how his story was told. For decades, he had allowed others, tabloids, gossip columns, and public speculation, to construct narratives that often distorted reality. Now, he had reclaimed the power to shape his own narrative, a subtle but profound act of agency. This reclamation was not loud or confrontational, it was measured, strategic, and deeply considered, reflecting the psychological insight he had developed over a lifetime in the spotlight. Through music, interviews, and carefully curated public appearances, Bruno began to demonstrate that truth and artistry could coexist. Songs hinted at vulnerability without oversharing, interviews acknowledged speculation without feeding it, and his public persona became a nuanced reflection of both the entertainer and the man behind the music. Industry insiders noted the skill with which he navigated this delicate balance, each move reinforcing that he alone controlled the story of his life, even under global scrutiny. This chapter of his journey underscores the power of agency in the face of relentless public attention. The courage to speak, to reveal decades of hidden truth, came at a cost, scrutiny intensified, and every action was examined for signs of inconsistency or strategy. Yet, by confronting the rumors on his own terms, Bruno demonstrated a resilience few in the industry achieve. He highlighted the often overlooked tension between fame's exposure and the protective power of discretion, illustrating that one could both reveal and safeguard elements of identity simultaneously. Even now, his story remains layered and incomplete, a mosaic of carefully chosen revelations and continued mysteries. Fans and observers are left to speculate on what remains untold, recognizing that fame can illuminate some truths while concealing others. Bruno's journey illustrates that control over one's narrative is not absolute, but the act of reclaiming it is itself a declaration of strength, insight, and self-possession. What remains hidden beneath the sequins and the spotlight, and how will Bruno Mars' next moves redefine the public's perception of him, both as an artist and as a man who has navigated decades of rumor, expectation, and secrecy? The story continues, a reminder that the truths we reveal are only part of the larger narrative we live.